Welcome to Home for Ambition, show number 4. It's exciting. We made it to four episodes in a row. For those of you that want to tune in live, we do this every Wednesday afternoon at 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. Eastern, live on the Leland platform. So great to have all of you that are here with us today live, and great for those of you that listen in on Spotify or Apple Music or wherever. I'm John Colliker, CEO and co-founder of Leland. We have Mike Mella, who runs product, and Jake Lingwall, VP of engineering. And we have our proud sponsor, Diet Coke, which is actually less of a sponsor and more of a constant tax on our company, but it's certainly how we're fueled. So we're excited. I got Diet Coke. Jake had spicy food for lunch. So we're ready to come with lots of hot takes. How are you guys feeling?
Let's go. I'm ready. I'm excited for this. I know it's only 4 weeks in, but I've really come to look forward to these talks every week. And it's crazy how often everything we talk about here just comes up. And I'm like, hey, we've got a podcast for you. Actually, you should join the Home for Ambition. Live obviously is the preferred treatment, but very topical. So I'm stoked to get into it today.
Yeah, I think we got good topics for today.
Cool. Let's jump in. First topic today is something I listened to on another podcast, which was Mark Andreessen, kind of famous co-founder of Netscape and now co-founder of Andreessen Horowitz, which has, I think, like $90 billion under assets under management. So done quite well with A16Z. His hot take that I would love to debate with you two is that AI is the silver bullet excuse for companies laying people off. Most layoffs are actually due to higher interest rates and overstaffing during COVID. So he says, quote, "This entire labor displacement thing is 100% incorrect. It's completely wrong. It's classic zero-sum economics. It was the combination of the two, zero interest rates going to zero during COVID, and then the complete loss of discipline at all these companies when they went virtual and when companies just became an icon on a screen. What you have happening right now is that essentially every large company is overstaffed. We could debate how much. It's at least overstaffed by 25%. I think most large companies are overstaffed by 50%. A lot of them are overstaffed by 75%. And now they all have the silver bullet excuse. It's AI. So let's start there. What do you guys think? Is AI a real threat to employment? Is it already showing up? Will it show up later? How do you guys think about what he said?
Well, I'll go first. I have two takes on this, which is one, I think I agree by default. It's hard to think that using like some simple questions that it's AI is the root cause of it. Because if you're like, if AI does super empower my employees, makes them all 10x more productive, why would I be getting rid of employees if they're now more valuable than ever? I also think we're pretty early for these layoffs to be happening for things that have happened, directly, since I think the models have been good enough to like actually potentially affect change there. And so I do think they are kind of excuse is my first reaction. And then my second reaction is actually going back to COVID, which is like, they actually might be the cause at the same time. In the sense of having been in some boardrooms when COVID was first hitting, and there was a lot of pressure to make moves and to do something right away because other people were doing it, and you didn't want to be the last to react to the pandemic and the changes. And there's just this pressure that comes from, certain VCs that puts pressure on boards, and board seats are shared, and everyone starts copying each other, and the pressure is very real and exists. And so I do think there is a certain aspect of, sure, it's probably zero interest rate, or it's probably bloated, or it's probably businesses that aren't doing that great. But I think AI is part of the formula of the math that says, well, how can we lay off 25% of the people? And I think some of the pressure is coming from just use AI to make up for it. And I think that's a very real narrative that's being forced down to make companies more efficient. Whether that efficiency is actually happening or not in these organizations, it's hard for us to know externally. But anyways, that's my two-sided take, which is like, no, I don't think AI is actually replacing people's jobs yet, but I do think it's in the formula of the pressure that companies have to respond. And that is very
real.
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously nuance on both sides. If the counter argument were fully true, so let's say AI is 100% responsible for layoffs, I imagine what you would be seeing is very role specific layoffs. Like, oh, we saw 50% of a company's engineering, like software engineering force gets laid off because they think software engineering is now X% more productive because of AI. And then when you see these like, oh, actually it's like a 20% trim across all roles, that's like,
Yeah.
okay, well, how is
You're
AI
assuming the exact impact across all roles. That feels like a stretch. Yeah.
exactly? And so you can actually go like layoff by layoff and like diagnose like how they're thinking about it. So Oracle, for example, a couple months ago, they're like, we're using AI for all of these like data center management things. Look at all these cool applications of it. And then their layoffs were like very targeted towards where they were seeing the most innovation. So I would argue that Oracle's was like more AI driven. I think Atlassian's was the other side of the spectrum, which was like, oh, haircut trim across the board. Like that has nothing to do with AI. I think Mark Andreessen's probably totally.
Yeah, I do think though, to Jake, your point, which is a really good point, like even if it's not true that AI is directly replacing those jobs already, it certainly can be a primary reason why people feel like, hey, we should be able to get some gains here from productivity, which is real. Like we are seeing AI be more, make our people more productive. And we're just comfortable with the fact that like maybe net we increase our productivity of our existing people, we reduce headcount, and so overall we're producing the same amount. Whereas maybe our competitors or startups are saying we actually want to do more with less, and so the bar has just been raised across the board. I think those are both interesting. I love the point on you would see role specific, and which you do see maybe in customer support, right? Like there are certain jobs that you'd say, yeah, there are companies cutting like massive amounts of people in customer support, which is a very one of the first types of jobs to get hammered. I think so a couple of things that I would add. Number one, I think that I agree that many large companies actually, they might be overstaffed today, but I think they probably took a Herculean effort to become the large company that they are. And I think that's just I've mentioned this in the past. Like I think there's an unfortunate reality that it might take more muscle to get the boulder up the hill. And then if you're just trying to like keep the boulder up there, it might take less muscle to do so. And so I think like there is an initial build out in a lot of infrastructure, both from an engineering perspective and even from a go-to-market perspective, that takes a lot of muscle, and that leads you to being overstaffed later on. And likely, if you give those remaining people AI, they're even more productive. They can probably hang on with less. I think that maybe the part that I would disagree with him the most on is that while AI is going to make make everyone more productive and everyone is going to be, better at their jobs to a certain extent, it doesn't factor in like the transition cost or like the reality that some people are going to adopt it at just a very different rate. And the people that don't adopt it, and we obviously see this in our programs, like the people that don't adopt it are so much less valuable, right? It's like imagine hiring like employee that doesn't know how to use a computer right now. It's like you just can't have that many people that do that. Like you might be able to have a couple of them be the front desk person or like stock the shelves with snacks or whatever, but at some point it's like we kind of just need everyone using a computer. That's obviously an extreme example, but at some point, like if you have an employee using AI and they are 100x more effective than the person that's not, you will lay those people off because they will be doing so much more than the folks that are not. And I think that there's also people that are kind of in the process of transitioning, and some companies are just not going to have patience for that. And so I think there are sort of like real transition costs and real like adoption costs that I don't think he's factoring in. And I actually do think companies will be forced to make hard decisions, and probably are. And they're not going to lay off their people that are the most AI pilled and dialed on all this stuff.
Yeah, a couple kind of tangent thoughts off that I think are interesting is one, I do think there's a difference between companies that are doing a lot right now versus startups who are trying to do more. I think that's a really good way to frame about it. But like if you're a large company and you're like a leader and you're trying to say, hey, look, we're AI native, and people are like, okay, if all your employees are 20% more productive, where's the 20% additional growth or outcome that we're realizing. And if you're not seeing that, then it's like, well, the only way to really like back up the fact that you're 20% more productive would be to reduce headcount by 20% and get the same results, right? And it's like, it feels like there's a bit of like, if X equals X plus Y equals Z, then something in the formula is broken and you've got to figure out which piece. And I think they're going to look towards, we do startups, so naturally we have to believe that larger competition is always ripe for disruption in some ways. And so, I feel like, large companies are probably loaded, and it is less easy to hide now, especially if the company has a new metric, AI adoption. Another thought I wanted to point to, because I just thought of it. We haven't ever talked about this before. It's been an interesting metric for a long time that you look at some companies which is like revenue per headcount or revenue per employee.
Yeah.
That's a really kind of interesting one to keep an eye on in the age of like AI, right? Because you would say in theory, these numbers should be better than ever then, right? And like everyone's enthralled by the idea of the single person $1 billion startup, which I see a new post every day saying like, oh, it's been achieved by some random people here or there. And I don't know.
Some fraud that's been selling GLP-1s with fake doctors. Yeah. That's the AI one we're going to claim. Nice.
Yeah. But, I do think there is an interesting like revenue per employee. Is that a great approximation to AI adoption, or is it still just a reflective of the model that you're in?
Yeah, well, I think I like that, because you basically get to decide, okay, let's say pre-AI revenue, like the gold standard revenue per employee was like $1 million or something, right? Where you're like, that's where you're operating at peak capacity. And companies were willing to go lower than that if they were in like growth mode trying to catch up to it, right? Then you get to a point where you're like, no, we're in harvest mode. We're actually we want to swing that harder the other way because we're trying to be cash flow positive or whatever it is. And let's say AI 3x is that or 5x is that. Well, then you still have the question, do you want to have more revenue or do you want to be more efficient? It's just, the bar is just different, right? It's like when I used to bike a lot and we would always say hills never get easier, you only go faster. And I think that's like sort of how I feel here, which is like that mountain I got to go climb to 100 million in revenue or 200 million in revenue or whatever. It shouldn't necessarily be, like I still like need to get there, still hard to get there, but I can get there maybe with fewer employees, but I'm still trying to get, maybe that just raises my goals or whatever it is, which is, still productive. You do get to this like fewer people benefiting from that growth argument, which is like how many employees does Anthropic or NVIDIA or any of these have, yet they are printing a ton of money. And so there's some economic downsides there, but I think that there's definitely something in that.
The last thing I would add here, and Jake had made this point a little bit earlier, but it's kind of like the incentive shift that has happened because of AI. I remember talking to a director of engineering at a large tech company, and he was explaining to me in a very honest, real way that his goal was to manage as many people as possible. It was like this kingdom building game where he's like, I have 250 people who report or like in my chain of command right now, and I want to grow that. And so when finance comes to him and says, how many more people do you need to like support your product? The answer was always more people. And if you could argue that the companies already could have operated like 20, 30, 40% more efficiently than they were. But the incentive was, in order for me to get better managerial or executive positions in the future, I need to have more managerial and executive experiences currently. So I'm going to keep driving direct reports, and I'm incentivized to increase the bloat. And if AI decreases that incentive, where it's like, I don't care how many people you manage, show me like what were you building, like this whole player coach idea of every manager still needs to be an individual contributor. Suddenly that incentive is gone. So even without any AI productivity boost, you might see teams run more efficiency just because the incentive system has changed.
Yeah, I know we got to move on to our next topic, but maybe the last thing I would say in all of this, well, maybe two things. Number one, beware of people talking their own book, which is basically everyone right now on Twitter, and you have to know like what they're saying, but then and why they would say it. The second thing is, I think, a time horizon cut in all of this, which is really like where all of this just gets messy. And it's like, obviously cars were good for the economy and probably created a lot of pain in the short term for everyone that wasn't involved in that new technology, right? And obviously that was true of the printing press and every good new technology that in hindsight we'd look back on and say, well, wow, that was an amazing improvement to how we lived our lives. And AI has all of these same promises, but probably times 10 because of just the nature of its ability to improve so quickly. But I think the disruptiveness and how fast the disruptiveness happens has to be taken into consideration. You can't just say, well, eventually the invention of the Industrial Revolution was really good for the economy, which is totally true. And it's hard to believe that AI won't be amazingly good for the economy with some amount of time. But how do you tell that to someone that just got laid off as a customer support rep after 15 years and they're like, okay, well, I literally can see the AI doing my job. So don't tell me that AI isn't taking jobs. It of course is going to create more opportunities, but now I got to figure out, I'm 45 years old. I still have 20 more years to be productive. I used to be really good at this. I used to provide for my family. I made $120,000 a year. It was awesome. And what now, Mr. Andreessen? Because it's clear that AI did just take my job, and it took it at a rate that was crazy. It got so good so quickly that it's better than me at everything I used to do. And so I think that the time horizon piece is the one that I would just that's where the empathy needs to come in and where the solutions need to come in. How do you retrain these people quickly? Because their jobs are going to change really quickly too. And it's hard to believe that doesn't, you can't brush that off, right? This is very much going to change. And that's why we need to be moving quickly. Anyways, let's move on to our next topic.
Yeah, I think the next topic I wanted to talk about is, they're all kind of related. Ambition in the new age of AI is so intertwined every direction. But I think the question I get the most often, and it comes up even from some of our team members here who are really pretty forward on AI adoption, is still hey, how do you keep up with everything that's changing? It changes so fast. And outside the obvious answer of listening to Home for Ambition every week, of course, it's how do you guys do it? How do you keep track on everything that is moving so fast, right? What tips do you have?
Yeah, I'm excited to hear your guys' thoughts. I'll speak personally on here is how I think about it, but I think there's a lot of nuance role to role and person to person. So Claude, what was the stats? They had 22 updates or releases in the 30 days of March or something. It was basically almost every workday there was a major update coming out.
And a few Saturdays.
And so it's super reasonable to be feeling that. Here's how I do it. Step one is, what are the ways AI could or should be impacting me and my life personally? And so understanding what AI can do is step one. And then from there, whenever there's a new release, read enough to know, does this apply to what I do in my job? So a very quick example would be Google drops Nano Banana, really good image generation. As a product manager, never generate images. That's not applicable to me. So I'll play around with it a little bit. I'll generate a couple things and then I'll likely move on very quickly. However, almost everything I've built in AI is deeply touching MCPs. So when I see a post about how MCPs suck because they're very token efficient, maybe we should be using CLIs plus, skills and agentic workflows. That's really interesting to me because MCPs matter a lot and I use them a ton. So I'm actually going to read a ton about that and understand it in a way that I can make an informed decision about what I should do. And maybe someone who designs board games is going to think the opposite. I don't care about MCPs right now. All I care about is image generation. And if that's better, my ability to create assets for my board game just got 10 times better. So they would think very differently than me.
Let me just ask you this though. How do you think about being an early adopter versus where do you want to be? I guess is the question. Because if you want to be an AI early adopter, you are going to waste an insane amount of time because there's a new ship. We talked about things that were shipping from one organization. So let's, when you factor in everything that's shipping from every organization, and one of those might be a gold mine, are you going to be the one that's going to test all of that? Or are you no, I'm going to come in a week late or 3 weeks late. I'm going to see is OpenClaw something that's going to stick? Is Claude just going to do OpenClaw? And then after a month, I'm willing to download OpenClaw. Is that too late? or willing to, get my Mac Mini set up and get everything going? Like, where do you want to fall?
Yeah, and I think it depends on like the percent fit. So if a role was like, if this AI feature that just got released is 100% fit, like it's going to 10x my productivity as a product manager.
Yeah, but when you factor in like every product development feature in that vein, like isn't everything supposed to make all of these like Perplexity, Claude, OpenAI, like they're all shipping new model updates and things like every 5 minutes. Like they would all.
No, I think there's a spectrum to it. It's like, okay, Claude can run on my computer. Like that might help to some extent. There's some reasons I might do that. But if you said like, oh, there's this new release in vibe coding so that whatever, it's like guaranteed production ready code every time you do it. It's like, I'm all over that one. And like, I will tinker or maybe explore Claude taking over my computer, but I don't think that's going to like 10x me and my.
Cool. Yeah, that makes sense. Jake, how do you think about it? I mean, I would say engineering probably has the most things shipping, and a lot of noise.
Yeah, there is an overwhelming amount, but I think I often get this question from non-engineers, people that are like learning the thrill of like building and creating things and automating things for like the first time. And my answer has always been kind of two-sided in the past, mostly to engineers, because keeping up with engineers, like it's always been changing. The front end frameworks changed every week, every month. It was like whiplash. And so we've kind of had this mindset of like constantly staying on top of technology changes. And now it's just like, that's reached a point of being a critical concern for more and more people. And so I try to answer their question the same way that I've answered it for engineers in the past at like boot camps and lots of junior engineers or recruiting or just helping people. And I think there's two. One, it's like, it's incredible if you can find a job that will pay you to learn on the job. Like that's a dream scenario because you're becoming more valuable while you're getting paid to do it. And it's this great feedback loop. Now, that is not necessarily the optimal plan towards staying on top of everything. And the real hard truth that I found over 20 years of working with junior engineers is that the ones that come in insatiably hungry to just learn and like they find the thrill of this and they want to go do it, and outside of work they go and they build and they try new things and they build and they test and they tinker and they just do this relentlessly nonstop for like 10 years. Those are the people that get exceptionally good at these things. And so I know it's taken to the level beyond how do you just stay aware of what's going on? Sure, there's like newsletters and posts, but how do you master these things? How do you continually update your mental model to make sure you're staying on top of them? And I think the harsh reality is if your goal is to master them, it is just going to take an incredible amount of time. And I don't think it is realistic to expect your job to like, oh, I want to try this thing. Will you guys pay me hours for me to go like play around with this thing and not produce results? Great if you do work somewhere that will do that. But I think the realistic answer is if you're serious about being an excellent AI builder, you are going to have to do the hard work in the age of AI, which is like still learn and master and get good with these tools and explore them. And it's an unsatisfying answers to people that like don't want to do that. But I still think the same is true. And maybe that loop is faster because you can master technology faster with AI to help you learn. But I think it does just take a lot of time. And like, how do I stay on top of stuff? Well, I'm building all the time. And like, that's the game. And engineers have always been worried about getting left behind. And, I think if you have not updated your AI mental model through experience in the last 6 months, like you're at this point super outdated, right? To the point of having very little value in an organization. And that might just be the game.
Yeah. I mean, it's probably why, it's like, I've been trying to wrap my head around why is AI causing us to work so much? Like, why is it this all-consuming thing where, you're just getting sucked in? And I think it probably has to do with that, which is just everyone's trying to keep up. And like the best way to do that is you just have to carve out time to keep experimenting and tinkering and figuring out what's real. It's also, I think, such a powerful new technology that it sucks you in and it makes you want to go deeper because you now have this like new capability you never had before. I think just to build on what you guys said, I think I've been thinking about this a little bit at the organization level. Like, how do I help an organization stay ahead and cut through the noise? And I think like, how do I avoid the whole company just tinkering all the time? Because you actually do need to produce results. And I think there's probably an amount of like encouraging people to spend time just digging in where they can after hours, or if it's a very hyper-focused thing related to the task at hand, then sure, dig in and on it during work hours. I think there is this like rise of the AI expert inside of each company, and it's sort of like organically happened at most companies. If you don't have someone at your company that's sort of become that, you should be that. Like that's obviously what we're trying to create in the AI Builder program, is like create a bunch of these everywhere, because it's going to be hard for your company to succeed if you don't have like someone that can be like having like 2 or 3 trusted like curators who are almost going through and saying, all right, this is real, this is not. I built this as like a proof of concept. So I think, here are some resources. Here's a Slack channel where we can share insights and learnings always. I think those things have really mattered. And then I think there's like, at the organization level, there's probably programs that you can, that's obviously what we're trying to do with the AI Builder program is create a system where we can drop in an organization and level everyone up quickly and cut through a lot of the noise for people. I also think that you have to be comfortable, maybe my push with you, Mike, was more like, I think you need to be comfortable not being an early adopter all the time, or figuring out like the version of early adopter, like early aware. I got to be aware of everything. And you were kind of saying this, like you got to be aware of everything. If it has something directly applicable in your job, you probably need to tinker with it a little bit. But you like legitimately can't afford to do that when there's so many companies shipping 50 things every 5 minutes, and they all have this like hypey launch video and so figuring out like, all right, you don't always have to be first, but you do need to figure out what's real as quickly as possible. I think that's like something I've been wrestling with, like being early enough to get alpha, but not early enough to where I'm constantly distracted and pulled in a million directions. That's hard to do, obviously. It's something and I guess some people would say it's better to just be early and be distracted than to be late and not have that alpha of discovering something powerful. Yeah. Let's go to the last topic.
Okay, last topic. This is a more philosophical one, but you have 2 camps of people as they talk about the future of AI. On one side, you've got the AI apocalypse, where AI comes in, it takes all of our jobs, which leads to like a mass recession or depression. It's like net bad for the economy. To your point, John, of it's not just that people are losing their jobs, but it's that they're losing their jobs at such a fast rate, and there's not new jobs created at a rate enough to like re-employ enough of the civilization. And then on the other side, you have like a world of abundance in which AI has solved disease and all of our hardest technical problems. And we all are able to have basically everything we want because AI is able to do things for us. And the question is, 1, which one do you think is more likely? And then 2, what needs to be true in order for us to make it to the world of abundance and avoid this like AI doomerism, AI apocalypse scenario?
Yeah. Jake, you want to start us off?
I'm processing it a little bit, and I knew we were going to talk about it, and then it's like you rehear the question and your mind races a million different ways. And I think at times we've used the term doomerisms on this podcast. I've been doomer to various degrees, and I still think that there's to your point earlier, John, for the individual out there is likely people feeling very doomed already because, they were caught in a spot that was disrupted and they have no plan or no foresight. And now they're already feeling that doom. On the mass level, I still think that what does it look like to avoid the doomerism at the mass scale is a good question. I do think at the individual scale, it is happening already and will continue to happen and will probably pick up. I don't know to what percentage, but I don't want to lose the thoughts of that. Doom is coming for some of them. But I think, what does AI have to be to avoid the mass doomerism for most people is a really interesting question. I think some of it will probably have to be some sort of regulation at some point. And there's really lots of great ethical questions, even for like customer support people, which is like, should AI be allowed to pretend and insist that it's a human in like a phone call interaction, right? Like there might be regulations that change the needs and the values of humans in there. And I think those are things that we should probably be looking at. But I also think about like AI in many ways is just this like lowering every barrier to entry possible most places, which is why everyone's talking about moats in businesses. Like, how do you protect your kingdom? The other way to look at it is not like how to build a moat. It's also like, man, look at the barriers to entries that are just being smashed in anything you want to do, like any creative pursuit you want to do, any business you want to build, any technology. Like you're no longer gate kept by almost anything. That's a super cool place to be. And you have to, at least I believe, and I think the ambition in our title kind of points to some of the fact that like we believe human ambition is durable. And as long as AI continues to enable the ambitious people to try and do things like I think it is, I think overall we will get to a better place as a society because we're going to be doing more and more cool things without gatekeepers or barriers to entry that are keeping people that have incredible ideas away from being able to produce at the level to be competitive. And so I think that's my main view on it is as long as it keeps enabling ambitious people to do things they couldn't do before, then I think we're going to get in a better spot.
Yeah. I like that. I think my guess, and it's wrong because everyone's guess is wrong, but my guess is that AI will rip through the economy at a rate that most technologies have not. Short term, that will cause a lot of like big questions for people that are trying to provide for their families. And I think it's going to be really important for companies and governments to organize around that and be able to support people in leveling up in AI and figuring out what other opportunities are available to them that, as you said, Jake, now have a lower bar to get started and to try. So hopefully that results in more entrepreneurship. Hopefully that results in people, learning these skills as quickly as possible, being able to build things that they otherwise wouldn't. The fact that our HR leader, our head of people, shipped a website today for our careers is like amazing, right? That's so cool that he built his first production ready website, and it's valuable to the organization. It makes him more valuable as an employee, and I think that's a good example of it. I think long term, there's this like, AI will just create so much goodness and will automate food production and all these things, and we'll all just kind of like have no purpose in life because AI will have like done it all. And I just think like I think it's really unlikely. Think how many problems there are. I mean, even just like space travel itself, like AI is going to be, it's going to have its work cut out for it if we think that like it's just going to automate all of our lives away. And I think people will find, and to your point, I think ambition it'll just grow if we do it in the right way. And I think we need to empower these people to be able to harness AI, but I think there's really an infinite number of problems to go solve. And, wouldn't it be wonderful if we solved all the problems here on Earth and we had to go solve, space travel and other, planetary things. But I think it's going to take a long time before we get to that point where food is solved and we have everyone's basic needs met and everyone's living in this like world of abundance. And I think there were probably some philosophizers around the time of the Industrial Revolution thinking the exact same thing. Like machines are just gonna make everyone's life. We're gonna have machines for everything, and it just takes a long time to connect to the physical world. So but I think maybe the more interesting part that we should focus on that I didn't focus on is like what needs to happen to usher that in as quickly as possible. A little bit on, obviously mentioned the reorganization of companies and governments to support maybe a rocky transition and make sure their people are taken care of during that time. But it would be, I think worth just getting your guys' thoughts on what kind of role do we as leaders and people on this call or listening to this podcast, like how can they actually, what do they do to mobilize to actually get us to that point?
Yeah, my thought here was like, if you look at innovation that has happened between the year like 2000 versus 2026, the physical world has changed very little. Like there have not been massive real world innovations. And I would say the majority of innovations have actually been on the software side, which And for some people, that's been awesome because software is a very lucrative industry, and you have tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of people who've benefited off of this like high margin, lucrative industry that's been created. But I don't think that like to the average person, their lives have gotten like significantly better. It's like, it's not like we got 10 times better at building houses, or food got, 10 times cheaper. And so I think in a world where AI basically shrinks all of the software jobs by 10x, that might force us as a society to say, we have been ignoring these hard problems. Like, how do we have better transportation? How do we have better like housing? How do we have better food production? And if those are the only problems left to solve, I believe in like the human desire to go solve problems and find meaning in solving problems. And so there is a hope, and like the positive spin of this is like humans are forced to go solve those problems and make progress there. And that's like the bull case is people start to get mobilized on, yeah, robotics is the future and production is the future. And how do we make everyone 100 times richer because we brought the cost of everything down by 100x?
Maybe one question for you guys that I think is tricky in this is, so in some areas you have what Jake said, which is like this removal of barrier to entry, right? It's so easy now to build a website. It's easy to get started on a lot of things. What are businesses that are easy to start? Restaurants. What are businesses that are awful to run? Restaurants. Like, are we sort of like competing away this? You sort of have like two tiers where you have like, oh, on one hand, you need like world leading LLM researchers that cost you $100 million a year to recruit. And on the other hand, you have, businesses that are just really easy to get going. And like the companies that build all the robots and have all the, the intelligence are this like set of, a dozen companies. And then the rest of us are sort of like, playing survival of the fittest for the rest of the scraps. Is that like, it's probably not that, but I'm just curious, like, is that is obviously one of the concerns, is like concentration of power and like sophisticated technologies.
Yeah, I think that is a real concern, and it's hard to know what you do to address that. Like, I don't think you can stop the super players from pushing forward because of like macro and even global economic concerns. I do think that the natural implication of reduction of barrier to entries is increased competition in every market, right? And this is the theory behind margin compression for SaaS businesses. And I do think competition is going to increase everywhere. And competition is fun if you enjoy it. And if you are hoping not to compete and be cozy and get settled in, it's going to feel very uncomfortable, right? But like, I think the way that, natural selection in the world's evolved is through competition. And I think that the net that will result out better for society. But yeah, you're going to have to compete, and you're probably going to have to compete with a lot more people in anything you want to do than you've ever done before, which is very difficult to do, which is distribution maybe is the move. Invest in distribution right now as much as you can. But, I think when I look at like the marketplaces that, I have some experience in, and anytime I reference anything I do for art or hobbies, I promise I'm not trying to draw attention. Don't go look me up anywhere. But like the novel writing market is like a perfect marketplace. Right? There's zero barrier to entries. Anyone can write a book. Anyone can put out a book. I think the last time I looked a few years ago, there's like 300,000 independent US authors and over like 6,000 different novels published every day on Amazon, which is more than like a human can read in years at a time. And it's like within a few weeks, we have added to the entire corpus of like the human library an insurmountable amount of content that anyone can ever read. And it's like a beautiful thing because now anyone can write and anyone can publish, right? But it is a incredibly competitive market to try and carve out a niche selling 99-cent ebooks against 300,000 competitors to which you have nothing to differentiate on because you're all just on someone else's platform outside of like your cover and your brand. And so it's like the forces are a beautiful thing at the same time, but they are also brutal. And like, you've got to be willing to compete in the things you try to do. And I fear that people will give up because competition is scary and it's hard, instead of like embracing it and realizing that you can compete now in markets you never could before. And I think that's like the biggest thing of like, how do we keep AI from crushing human ambition? And how do we get people to embrace it?
No, I think that's great. I think like that maybe is the takeaway for those listening, is like, figure out how to make AI fuel your ambition, not hurt it, because it does feel like it can like make you feel like it's not worth trying if this thing is just as smart as you or just as good as you. So I think that but then when you find something where it's magic and you can have more revenue per employee, or you can have a greater impact per person on your team, it can obviously create amazing opportunities for you and those closest to you. So thanks for everyone for joining. It's a fun conversation, and yeah, we'll see you next week. Thanks for being a part of the journey.